Do you think you can make a difference in this world? Do you think you can be an instrument of God no matter how insignificant you feel about yourself or your life situations? I've heard people say that no matter what we do, it makes no difference in this world we live in. I sometimes give into that thought myself because I see the world will go on without me or in spite of me. One way or another, the world will continue, the world will go on. I want to be important. I want to be that person that makes a difference in this world for the better, important in making significant change in this world that's for the better. And we all have that desire. No matter who we are, we have that desire within us to be someone in this world that changes the world. There are times I wondered in that thought process, is really God talking to me? Can God actually talk to me? Will I be able to actually hear the voice of God and tell me that tells me what to do? Am I that important for God to speak to me? And what significant thing can I do in this world? I read the stories of great men and women of history. Their lives were not that great when I look at it, but of course I don't have all the information, all the knowledge of it, but then I still think their lives are not that important, but I also know that God has used them. Their lives were not something that I would consider to be that God would love and like, but the truth is, God has used them to change the world. But what am I? Is God you going to use me? Sometimes these thoughts are discouraging because of all the hurdles that I have to jump and all the struggles that I have to live through. One day, with these kinds of thoughts in my mind, I visited my friend John. I told him how insignificant we are, how unimportant we are. Even if we don't do all that God has called us to do, he said, it is quite all right, Jose. It is quite all right. God will find a way to do it. No, that's not what I wanted to hear. But he said, God will find a way to hear it. Well, but the thing is, God will find a way to do the things that God has planned either with you or without you. You might as well join the party. You can struggle all you want, but you might as well join the call that the Lord has given you. Respond to the call God has given you. Why not enter into what God's plan is when you know God will continue the journey with you or without you? But if it is with you, that choice you make will be wonderful. It is not for the sake of the world, but for the sake of your own fulfillment of the call that God has given you. And what happens after that is left into the hands of God, and God will continue to work miracles through your life if you are willing to give into that prompting of the Spirit. Then he said, remember what Noah did. Everyone around him thought that he was crazy. While there were no clouds in the sky and the place was in a drought, Noah thought the land was going to flood and he should build an ark to take cover, to protect himself and to protect his family, his children, his livelihood. He has to make an ark, take cover. While for the rest of the world around him, it was absolutely senseless. For him, he knew in his heart he should listen to what the Lord has asked him to do. But then the world around him pressures him so much to the point he didn't know exactly is that what it is supposed to be. You know, when we look at the Genesis chapter 6, we can say it's a story of wickedness of humankind, and there is nothing more to the story. But that's not the truth. There is more to the story than the wickedness of humanity. Even when the story speaks of destruction that was headed on their way, Noah does not give in to fear or disobedience or lack of listening. He's listening to his inner heart. And that is what changes him. He was not ready to abandon what he believed God was asking him to do. However silly and senseless he looked to the world outside of him, he was not ready to give up on what was asked of him. He never quit believing in that prompting in his heart. Yes, he was listening, And that's why he could hear the voice of God. The character of Noah is the key point in the story. The righteous character, the listening character, the character of Noah that made him hear the voice of God and to follow the prompting of the Spirit is what made this chapter very different from more than the destruction of the humanity. Therefore, just like in the story of Enoch, which we saw earlier in the previous chapter, we see the story of Noah, someone who was righteous, listening to the voice of God, walking with God, made all the difference to do what is significant in this world. While he did that, he was not sure if he was doing the right thing, if that is what is going to happen. Can he invite his family, his immediate family, and collect all these animals into this ark and shut the door? Is there going to be a rain? Is he going to look foolish and silly? But is God going to act? He trusted what the Lord told him in his heart. He was not ready to fall prey to the pressures around him and leave what God asked him to do because he was afraid of what the world will think of him. It looks like God was planning the flood to clean the earth of all the elements that were ungodly, but in reality, the whole story is far more than the destruction of the land. It was the execution of a new future. It was the beginning of something wonderful and meaningful, and a time where God promises the safety of all humanity for an eternity. The destruction that we saw is actually a new beginning. The end we see was not actually the end of it all. For those with short sight, it was destroyed, but for Noah, it was only the beginning of new reality. However insignificant or unimportant that he must have felt before the flood, and however crazy and silly and foolish he must have looked for the rest of the world around him, he sure knew now, after the flood or during the flood, that when God calls you and when you listen to God, everything will take a turn to the better. However bleak and fuzzy the world looked, the world can still rejuvenate, renew, and begin anew, because God's action starts everything new. The end we see is not the end of it at all. When everyone thought he was lost and crazy, life for him was just beginning. Meaning to say, the smallest promptings that we hear in our heart is the way how God continues the journey in the world today. The problem for us, or our anxiety, that what difference can we make in this world? Are we important for God? Is there a God who pays attention to us? All those thoughts, all those anxieties and feelings can be helped by listening to the inner voice God gives us. That is a solution to get out of this anxiety that we have. Are we important in this world? Can God make a difference through us? I promise you, God can.